Hello, this is Max Grossman with the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt, and it is our honor today to welcome Norma Chavez, who is a candidate on the Democratic ticket for House Seat District 77. Norma, so great to see you today.
Thank you.
Glad that you could join us.
Thank you, Max.
I want to start by just talking about Norma's background. Can I call you Norma?
Sure.
I'm Max.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Max. You can call me Norma. Everybody can call me Norma.
Thank you so much. Well, you've got such a distinguished career that I feel like calling you Empress, but I'll just call you Norma.
No. And everybody, I always tell them, you can call me Norma.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, where'd you grow up?
I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. I'm a product of public schools. I attended Hillside Elementary, Ross Junior High, that is now Wally Hartley, and also Burgess. Both of my parents are migrants from my grandparents came over during the 1910 Revolution, and so I come from a family of veterans, and I'm extremely committed to our beautiful desert city over here in El Paso. I am the only daughter of Norman and Connie Chavez, my beautiful parents, who are 91 years old, and I'm a caregiver of them, and they are a strong 91, and they are one of the reasons that I'm running for the legislature.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. And currently, what part of town do you live in these days? You're in 77?
I'm in Central, in 77, yes. I have a little, I think I was tiny before tiny was cool. I have a little tiny house that I bought. My parents used to have a gas station, NCN Texaco, at the corner of Trowbridge and Clark, which is how I ended up going into the Texas legislature. But there was a lady who had the house next door, and I wanted to do a car wash, and I approached her. Her name was Paula, and I said, I want to buy your house. She said, no, my husband built my house, and I will die in this house. And she got sick. I had to move out with her daughter, and she called me and said, I'm ready to sell you the house. So that's how I ended up with the tiny house next to the gas station.
Okay.
I finally got my dad out. It was NCN Texaco for Norman, Connie, Norma. It was a good old-fashioned full-service service station at Clark down the street. It was the first Texaco near the refinery, and my dad would do all of everybody's, oil changes. He'd go pick them up with flat tires. So everybody knows my father in that area.
Okay. Excellent. And what year did you first run for office, the state level?
Well, that's how I can bring in the Texas legislature and the federal work that I did. When my father bought the gas station at 90, he used to be a truck driver. We wanted to get him off the road, and the gas station was up for sale, and I basically closed the deal in August. I had a real estate license at the time, and I actually have a license. It's inactive. And when I closed it, I realized that I was going to be moving back to El Paso, because I had been in Austin going to school, and during the real estate boom in Austin. So as we closed in August, in December of that year, the Federal Clean Air Act amendments passed, and it impacted auto emission testing, which was part of the pro forma for the gas station. It was emission testing and also auto repairs. So I got involved in that issue. That turned out to be a federal issue, that they were trying to centralize emission testing. I don't know if you remember that. Some states were doing that. And so I organized 170 small businesses in El Paso. I went through the Chamber of Commerce, who at the time, the Greater Chamber had what they called the Minority Business Council.
What years are we talking about here?
This was in 1990, the 1990 Federal Clean Air Act amendments. And so we fought the EPA. We ended up, it was called the Texas Air Control Board at the time, and we ended up explaining that we had a different air basin with an entire population of over 1 million people that didn't do emission testing, and we did not feel that we were being, accurately put in non-attainment. So the non-attainment issue is something that I know very well. We won the issue. I testified to the EPA in DC. I came to Texas, and we organized and approached the Texas Air Control Board and provided input on their rules. And it took me 3 sessions as a citizen advocate to pass the Texas Clean Air Act, which was in 94.
But when did you run for office then?
Well, from 94, Nancy McDonald retired, the state rep that represented the area, and I was told, you need to run. So I had just passed a citizen bill. I had non-traditional name ID because I was in the newspaper every other week. They were following this issue because El Paso was the lead on the issue, and Gary Shar, the reporter. I mean, it was just perpetually on the news, and so I ran the year that we passed the Clean Air Act.
That was 94?
Yeah, 90. Actually, 94 is when we passed the legislation. In 95 in 95, 96 was when I filed, and 97 is when I took office. 96 is when I won.
What was the House seat then?
76 at the
Okay.
time.
So it was Texas House District 76. You were elected, and you began your term of office in 1996, and you served for 14 years.
And I served for 14 years.
Until 2010.
2011.
2011, okay. Tell us a little
January
bit, Norma,
2011.
about your proudest achievements. I know you had a reputation for bipartisanship. You reached out to Republicans to find common ground on key issues, which is kind of unusual for the El Paso delegation. You served on key committees. I think you were the leader of 3 committees, right? And passed quite a lot of bills. More than 50 bills, right?
140 bills as amendments, as constitutional amendments, as appropriation riders. Sometimes the bill's dead, and you find it's called a vehicle. Look for a vehicle with germaneness. This is like inside hardball. If the bill is germane, then you can put your bill on it. And so by the time your bills are dying, all the staff is looking for a germane bill so we can put our bill on. That's a legislative skill that a freshman doesn't know. That's something that you learn as you go through the process. I think because I worked in auto emissions on those 2 sessions, I learned a lot of the procedural as a citizen advocate, testifying in all the committees. So when I got to serve, I was already on not on a different kind of learning curve. I did serve in 3 leadership positions under 3 different speakers. Under Speaker Pete Laney, Democrat, strong Democrat. I served with Bob Bullock in my freshman term, and also with Governor Bush, George Bush. And of course, all of them were huge dynamic personalities. From there, the governor went to the White House, much more partisan than what he was in the governor's mansion. And then we had Tom Craddock, where we had to make a deal. They had elected over 100, close to 105 Republicans. The Republicans were going to elect a Republican speaker. It was just a matter of fact. And there were Democrats that were courted to say, you can come into the fold so that you can, play the game and not sit on the bench. And so I became what they called a Craddock D, and that served our community well. Because you have to negotiate. Power is about having the skills to negotiate, having the skills to be at the table of power and not at the outside. And I had those seats because I made some key decisions. I got criticized by that by some Democrats. My constituents, for the most part, understood so long as I was delivering for them. But that was important. And then under Speaker Strauss, who was a fair, moderate Republican who, was one of the leaders who allowed Democratic chair people, mixed leadership in the chair and the vice chair and in the committees. He actually got a little criticized for that as we started going from moderate Republicans to radical right and radical left Democrats. And he served on calendars under him, and I was vice chair of calendars under Craddock. So
that's a very important position, calendars.
Calendars is a player committee that no freshman will get on.
Right.
Calendars is
if a bill can't get past calendars, it's not going to be
dead.
Law.
It's dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the Senate, the lieutenant governor determines what bills go to the floor. So he has all the power. But in the House, it's the committee of calendars that decides whether or not a bill goes.
Tell us, Norma, what are your 3 proudest achievements in the legislature during those 14 years?
I think one of the most important for me is the medical school. When I had to take a tough vote. I became part of the Craddock leadership. It was difficult, but the medical school was important for the entire community. besides being in House District 76. And working with our delegation, I was in appropriations at the time, and I was able to remove a rider that gave $48 million for the initial funding for the medical school. So I'm very proud of our delegation for that, and I'm very proud of the fact that I had to learn to maneuver and play the game to achieve that. And so that's one of my...
And that required bipartisanship.
Bipartisanship, it required our entire delegation, and it also required being at the table of power. You know, you don't get to play the game if you're not there. And so I utilized and have always utilized my seniority, my position for the community. And that to me is what comes first. Right. Not my agenda, but that's one of the important issues.
Are there a couple of other achievements that you were particularly proud of?
Yeah, there's a couple that I think that were big and impactful for El Paso. One was, and again, that's like a political move that I did, and that's expanding the Transportation Commission from 3 members to 5 members, and basically securing the first El Pasoan to serve on the TxDOT Commission, which is huge. And how that happened is, you learn lessons. I'm not perfect. I did some mistakes. But we had the Senate bill come over, and it was Governor Perry, was fighting with Senator Lucio. And they wanted my bill to go out and not Senator Lucio's. And I told his chief of staff, I said, no, we're going to push Senator Lucio's bill, and I'm going to get the first commissioner in El Paso. And so that's what happened. I cut the deal. And everybody, when you make a deal like that, you pretty much, you know, it's a done deal. Normally, the sponsor of the bill, which was Senator Lucio, sorry, Senator, but gets the first commissioner. So because I did that, I also was able to expand the Department of Public Safety Commission, which was easy. It wasn't like the Transportation Commission, from 3 to 5, and that's like a people, public safety is a people committee, but when I go and get my driver's license and I see the 5 commissioners, I always think, I did that, Bill. You know, so that's kind of cool. And what else? I did the legislation to lay down the foundation for the law school. Before I did a study bill, I brought in Representative Irma Rangel, who is the first Latina elected to the Texas legislature from El Paso. Not from El Paso, from the state of Texas. She's the first Latina. She's from South Texas. May she rest in peace. I brought her to El Paso. We did this Floricanto with her, which was really beautiful. And we talked about the law school. And she said, she was the chair of higher education. And she said, Texas Tech, at the time, Senator Shapley wanted to do this teleconference law school. And we brought her in, and she said, separate and unequal is not acceptable. And it will not happen on my leadership time. And so she said, you need to do a study bill, you need to get the support. So I filed a study bill, and of course the lawmakers of other parts of the border, it was for El Paso, a study bill for a law school in El Paso, and they changed the language and said along the Texas-Mexico border. But that study bill is there, it's passed, and we can now go the next step. You know, is UTEP in the capacity to do that next step? Or Texas Tech? I don't think Texas Tech.
You want to see a law school in El Paso?
I think UTEP has the infrastructure for us to do a law school in El Paso.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about party. Okay. First, I want to say that we at the Taxpayer Revolt absolutely endorse the candidacy of Norma Chavez. We're not Democrats, not by a long shot. We tend to be libertarian. Nevertheless, we share enough in common with Norma that we strongly and unreservedly support her campaign.
Thank you.
Of course, there are different kinds of Democrats, right? You've got Democrats that are further to the left, the progressives, and you have what I call blue dog Democrats, who are a little bit more old school. I'd call Brian Kennedy on City Council a blue dog Democrat. I call Joe Molinar, Art Fierro, blue dogs. Those are Democrats that are more fiscally conservative, that are more centrist in their approach, including to social issues. I know, for example, that you've expressed solidarity with Israel.
Yes.
That would put you at odds with some of the far left Democrats.
Yes.
I've seen you at pro-Israel rallies.
Yes.
And, of course, I'm Jewish and support that completely.
Yes.
In any case, looking at your platform and looking at your record, you seem to be with the taxpayers, more than most Democrats who've served at the state level, who are often there to really sort of bring home the bacon, expand spending, expand government. You seem to be far more sensible, far more fiscally conservative, concerned about tax rates. Am I correct?
Yes. I could be considered a fiscal conservative, a social moderate. I will defend to the end El Paso. I will speak up on social issues that are important to me, but I will not. I also think that budgetary issues are extremely important because we all have to live within our own personal financial budgets, and it seems like in El Paso, what I've seen happen with the expanded certificates of obligation, the increase in taxes, the out of control, CADs. That's one of the issues that I wanted to run, and that's one of the issues that you and I talked about, is that the taxpayers are being unfairly overtaxed, and I believe one of the issues for me is the appraisal districts. They're out of control with power. We passed legislation to put 3 members, elected members, onto the appraisal board. Nobody ran, and to be honest with you, when I saw it, it was just too late because I thought, Max would have been good for that. But
you don't want me on there, believe me. I would just eliminate it.
Well, there's processes and steps, Max. You got to walk away from the table with something, not nothing. That's something I learned.
That's wise.
Yes, but yes. So I see my mom, and she pays her tax bill, what she can in January, and then she makes payments, and then she says, I'm done, and I was walking, I'm a walker. I walked, and I was really heartbroken to find that a taxpayer in the district near Escarate Lake was just telling me that he was just going to lose his house. He was just very, resolved to the fact that he was going to lose his house because he couldn't pay his taxes.
These are problems in El Paso, and we're going to come to your platform shortly. But before we do, I want to digress and talk a little bit about your opponent.
Okay.
Let's get to him first. Initially, there were 3 Democrats vying for this nomination. You,
4.
There were 4.
Omer, Essa.
Oh, there were 4. Correct. I'm corrected. 4. There was you, Vince Perez, who is your current opponent, former County Commissioner of Precinct 3. Alexander Anello, former City Council representative of District 2. And the 4th guy was?
Insurance man.
Insurance guy. Okay. After the first round of this election, 2 were eliminated, and now it's just you and Vince Perez. Now,
nobody got 50%. Nobody got 40%.
Right.
It was 38, 34, 28, 8. It was what we expected in a primary with 3 people with somewhat name ID because they served in public office.
Right.
So I think that the Vince and myself, there's a clear difference between the 2 of us.
Well, there's no question about that. The first thing I want to talk about with regard to Vince Perez is that while he was on the El Paso County Commissioner's Court, he voted to increase his own salary not once, not twice, 5 times. Let me count the ways. October 2014, 3%. August 2016, he increased his salary 42.4%. August 2017, 1%. August 2018, 4%. And then before leaving office, in September 2019, he voted to increase his salary 21.6%. This means that when he entered office, he was making $60,855. And when he left office, he was making $114,901 in executive salary, for a total increase of just about 89%. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could increase our own salaries simply by voting for those increases?
In 8 years.
Yeah, this is absolutely obscene. I don't think it's excusable. I think it's his cross to bear. And quite frankly, he was run out of office by Ileana Holguin. And one of the main reasons he was run out of office, that he lost his seat, humiliated, it was a healthy margin that he lost by, is because he raised his own salary 5 times. How do you feel about that, Norma?
Well, you don't get into public office to enrich yourselves. A public servant is there to serve the people, and I find it that his excuse is perpetually, because in perpetuity, he increased the salaries, increased taxes by the 5 members, because that's only his salary. He increased all the commissioners' salaries, as well as the county judge. And so he has, in perpetuity, increased taxes forever because of that.
It's not reversible. That's right.
No. And so that to me is problematic, because the taxpayers should have a public servant that understands their role, right? There we go.
There he is. That's Vince. And those are the 5 salary hikes. Okay? You can read all about them. You can actually search them on the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt webpage. And
it's time to say no to Vince Bettis. We cannot afford to do that. We cannot have Vince is for Vince and Norma's for El Paso.
I've always found Vince, I've followed his career, he's unscrupulous, he's conniving, he's a maneuverer. I can tell you that in 2012...
He's a pontificator. He pontificates.
In 2012, he and his future wife, Claudia Ordaz, worked in Washington, D.C. In the office of Congressman Sylvester Reyes. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that Vince defected to Reyes' opponent, Beto, in an election that Reyes ultimately lost, while Claudia stayed on in Washington, pretending to be an ally of Reyes in his office. And she ended up getting terminated, is my understanding. So that gives you an idea of what kind of guy we're talking about here. And, he's been in the media for a number of scandals, including the Whataburger scandal in 2016, sort of a you-know-who-I-am moment in front of the police who went to his vehicle to see what was going on. He hired Jaime Abetia for years to handle a lot of his political stuff. In fact, Jaime was his aide in the county commissioner's court before he had a legal problem and no longer was employed by the county. But Jaime is Jaime. Those of you who know Jaime Abetia and his blog know exactly what I mean. Jose Rodriguez, who was our former state senator, was publicly shamed by Vince Perez because he refused to support his wife at the time, Claudia's political campaign. And so Vince drafted a letter in order to make him look bad. And I could go on and on and on. I can tell you that when I served on the County Historical Commission, Vince Perez wrote to the Texas Rangers in order to unseat and investigate several members of a public commission, unpaid historian volunteers, to try and send us to jail, simply because we disagreed with him on a political issue. He gets voted out of office. We all think, finally done with this guy. And here he is, rearing his head, raising money, raising serious money. And
well, he's supported by Republicans. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He is receiving a tremendous amount of money from a political action committee called Legacy PAC 44, which is funded by billionaires, and their purpose is to take out anybody who is not pro-voucher. And so they have school vouchers, and they also have put billions for Abbott, for Trump, for Senator Cruz. They put hundreds of millions of dollars for candidates against Speaker Phelan's opponents. It's not debate discussion anymore. And I think that that's one of the greatest things that concerns me about going back, is that I served in a time when there was debate, dialogue, discussion, compromise. The best of the best minds worked on education. If you had an issue, you had mentors that you could go to. If they happened to be a Republican, you could sit there and say, this is the reality in El Paso that doesn't work based on your formula. And now my understanding is that if it's not a hard right-liner Republican with the proposal or the initiative, it doesn't go anywhere. So that means that we have to have those people sponsor our bills and file the bills so that it has a chance in committee. So that dynamic is interesting to me because I'm used to being able to work your bill. I'm a vote counter. I'm not a great public speaker. I'm not going to do this prolific change on the House floor, but I was a vote counter. They knew if I brought the bill to the floor, I had the votes in committee, in calendars, or on the floor. And so that being said, I'm trying to figure out the organizing game of the floor, and we don't know what it's going to be until these runoffs elections, because some of the further right Republicans may win on May 28th. And so what does that mean to the dynamic of El Paso? I don't know. But I'm not afraid to talk to people. I'm not afraid to cross the aisle. I did things like I took suitcases full of bread that the Tiguas made to the Capitol and give every House member, every senator, the governor in introduction, in a goodwill. I
mean, that's great because these far right Republicans, as they're called,
yes.
I mean, they're not demons, okay? They're
manipulated.
They're men and women who were elected, and we may disagree with them, or some people may vehemently disagree with them, but oftentimes they're treated by Democrats as people you just don't talk to, whereas you are among the first to reach out and start conversations.
Well, yeah, and we have a history of having good Republicans like Jack Vowell and like Pat Haggerty that served in leadership positions that crossed the aisle back then with Democratic leaders because they had to. So I think for us, it's a little bit awkward for it to be so far right. But it's not just a state of Texas issue. It's the national sentiment and actually what's happening in politics across the nation and in D.C. Right. And when is it going to stop? Because it's really the taxpayers, it's really the daily Texans who are impacted by some of these terrible laws.
The divide has never been wider.
It has never been wider than what it is now.
Let's get to your platform. There it is. This is one of the many Norma Chavez mailers that we intercepted.
And my endorsements.
And your endorsements. And by the way, we're on there. See that?
Yes, Taxpayer Revolt.
There it is. Exactly. So there are 4 key points listed here. Mm-hmm. Let's go through them. Taxpayers first. Ya basta con los impuestos altos. We like that very much.
Ya basta con los impuestos altos.
And we are delighted that you put that first. So you are concerned about taxpayers.
I'm concerned about taxpayers. I'm concerned with, again, I think the CAD has to be, we have to do something with CAD reform. Too much power. The certificates of obligation, of course, are in El Paso. We're the #1 city of the large cities across the country with certificates of obligation. We're basically are overspending more than what we have.
Right. The city has $851 million in principal and interest on 10 COs. It is just an incredible figure and more CO debt than the largest 5 cities in Texas combined.
Yeah, it's too much, and I think that there's other cities that are interested in this. So again, that becomes part of the coalition building, but also a political maneuver that you can do is you can bracket. You can bracket for El Paso through legislation, make it a local bill, and say city with a population of over 500,000, 50 miles within the border of Mexico, and then it becomes a local bill. So that Dallas doesn't care because they just say, okay, it's El Paso. Right. So those are things that a freshman's not going to understand or be able to do, and those are things that I could propose. Sometimes, Max, you got to introduce it, and like I told you, it took me 3 sessions to pass the Texas Clean Air Act.
Right.
But you got to introduce it, and you may have to massage it and push it, get a bunch of Republicans to sign on the bill, and then you move into policy changes.
Because certificates of obligation are a debt instrument. It's a way to issue debt without the approval of the voters. So rather than going for a general obligation bond, which goes on a ballot, right? Like our ill-fated quality of life bond, for example, or the public safety bond, this is debt that you just issue, And pretty much it's no holds barred. Originally, these were for emergencies. That was the guidance from the Texas Comptroller. And the Texas legislature has been increasingly willing to allow local governments to issue non-voter approved debt almost without limit. And it has gotten El Paso City and increasingly the county into 9 figures of debt that's not going to go away for decades, which pressures our budgets and raises our taxes. And so this is a state issue because COs are regulated by state law. And if elected, Norma, we would love to see you make an effort to get involved in that process and possibly curtail some of the worst CO abuses.
And also, I'd like to do, I serve on the Citizen Bond Advisory Committee for EPISD. And I know that they denied a advisory committee for one of the bonds. I think it's really important because I know that the citizens that were appointed to the EPISD bond, we did find some things. You are able to have citizen watchdogs to, after it's already passed, right? And I think that's an important step too. When you engage this, that's what's wrong with El Paso. We don't have enough people participating in the political dialogue and in policy issues. The only way you can do it is invite them to participate on something like this. And I think there's enough taxpayer interest that we might be able to do that.
Hey, we got the word taxpayer in our name. So
that's right.
Vehicle registration
Revolt.
fees. Right. Vehicle registration fees. Our delegation, including State Senator Blanco, made a group effort to increase our vehicle registration fee to the highest in the state of Texas among 254 counties. And it was only thanks to Republican intervention that it got shot down.
Did they have a reason to do that?
Well, you increase the vehicle registration fees, and that money, I think they were going to increase it by $10,
was going to go where?
Can be leveraged to bond hundreds of millions, which then goes to transportation infrastructure. But we didn't want to have the highest vehicle registration fees in Texas in one of the poorest cities in Texas. Where do you stand?
A fee is a tax. It's just another word
for a tax. Of course it is.
So they were trying to tax.
Would you have joined our state senator and your colleagues in doing that?
No, I would not have.
You would have opposed that?
I would have opposed it, yes. And again, we have gone away from calling it a tax for too long. We have so many fees on everything, and they're really taxes. So
exactly.
No, the inspection is important and registration is important, but not to increase it, especially in a community like El Paso. If it was only they bracketed for El Paso only?
Look, anyway,
or was it for the whole state?
It's for the whole state.
That they wanted to increase it by $10?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, that's for El Paso only.
See, that's what I'm saying. You can bracket it.
Yeah, it was going to be, we were going to be, we already have the highest in so many things. Certificate of obligation debt, per capita poverty, and so on and so forth.
With seniority, I would like to get back on calendars, and with calendars, I would work to kill it.
That's what we'd like to hear. Now let's go on to your other priorities. Briefly, infrastructure, roads, and highways. That's your number 2 on your list here.
We're the second largest land port in the state of Texas behind Laredo. We have a big traveling commerce from Mexico to the, Detroit auto industry. It's an important revenue for us, but the highways are way too overused, and I believe that we need to divert the traffic, the 18-wheeler traffic, commerce traffic through the Tornillo Bridge. That's what it was originally made for, and also Santa Teresa, and also 54.
Should we be widening I-10 through downtown? Is that necessary?
No, I don't think that. To me, I go back to clean air attainment. I think if you got all those 18-wheelers going, I call it the grassy knoll. If they go and they put that grassy knoll over the downtown area,
the deck plaza,
you're gonna have a lot of pollution issues that are gonna.
I interviewed Ted Houghton, who's a really nice guy. We disagree on many things, but we agree on some things.
Yeah.
And of course, he's all about the deck plaza, and he's telling me on tape that it's something like a $300 million project, but I'm sure it's $1 to $2 billion. I'm sure it's $1 to $2 billion. It's a huge project.
They under budget, and it was also considered one of the worst ideas by one of the transportation think tanks.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that. They rated it.
I mean, I don't
It was one of
know.
them.
Norma, I mean, Duck Plaza is pretty. You know, who could have anything against it? I just don't want to pay for it. I don't
Alameda, ever since I left and before I left, I did the last project in that area with curbs and lighting. And I'm sorry, but Alameda needs to be redone. You know, before you're going to spend $300 million. Back in the day, it was going to cost $108 million, which is what the tramway.
Alameda should be a higher priority than adding a lane down.
That's where the working class goes to work.
That's right, and they're all trapped in traffic every day. So your third point is right here. Public safety. What do you want to do for public safety?
Well, first of all, I'm endorsed by all first responders. I'm endorsed
fire
by
and police.
I'm endorsed by the Sheriff's Officers Association, the El Paso Police Officers Association, the Combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas, which is CLEAT, a statewide organization, and the Firefighters Local 51.
You are with the police and fire.
I am solidly with law enforcement. I'm a law and order person. I am not for defunding the police. I think what's happened. I think what's happened.
You're going to make so many Democrats angry. You don't want to defund the police.
You know what?
You don't need the police. Come on.
What's happened in other cities is terrible, including Austin, Texas.
Well, I'm from Minneapolis. Don't get me started.
Well, look at Austin, Texas.
All right.
Okay. A lot of good police officers retired because they didn't want to be subjected to ridiculousness. I believe a bad cop is a bad cop and needs to be taken out. And the law applies equally to the person, and there should not be any special treatment. And so that's without saying. But to defund the police, to leave, and right now with so many issues, so much chaos, we have, disgruntled bodies since COVID. It seems like everybody came out of COVID angry, and there's so much aggressiveness. There's so much more violence. There's violence in, family violence that I'd like to see us have our law enforcement doing their job.
Yes.
They don't need to be along the border. They need to be saving keeping our community safe.
Now we're with you 100% on that. And, and then your fourth point is elder and veteran care support.
Yes. I am an advocate for elder care. I am a caregiver of my 91-year-old parents who I love dearly. They're in great shape, I say, because I do take good care of them. But I've also seen all the obstacles that the elderly go through. I have a lot of friends. You talked about your mom moving here to El Paso, and I have a lot of friends that are caregivers. Some of their parents are already deceased, or cousins with my uncles and my aunts, and we all kind of share stories. We get together and say, okay, well, what are you doing? This is what I'm doing. But also access to services, public services that it's available. We're going into this session with a $22 billion surplus, and I think the elderly should be one of the first items that we take care of.
Was it 22 or 32?
22 billion.
22 billion.
And then we have teachers that didn't get a pay raise. They kind of baited and switched them. And so we have an education system that's failing. We are not educating our public school kids as we should. We are not investing in the future. And so from there, back to the elderly, there is what they call an assets test. And some individuals, if they own a car, if they have savings, if they have own a home, they have to get rid of everything in order to qualify for services. That is just wrong. My parents are blue collar, and they saved every dime to have what they have, and they shouldn't. I've spoken to people who said I had to sell the house. I had to put the house in my daughter's name, and then the daughter kicks them out. There needs to be protections for the elderly. That's the Human Services Committee. Nobody ever wants to be on that committee. It's considered the People's Committee. I'm willing to talk to the delegation and tell them, look, I don't mind going to Human Services because it is a big issue for me. With that is veterans. Veteran care is extremely important. Some of the veterans that are not recognized by that fire that happened in the National Archives, we want to make sure that they have the services, Texas services, and that's something that I could just be an advocate for. It's a federal issue also.
Okay.
But veterans are very important for me, as well as the elderly, and I would say that that's probably my number 2 after the taxpayers.
And just briefly, what can the state do for military veterans in El Paso?
We have the Texas Veteran Commission. We have the Texas Veteran Retirement Home. We have are starting the construction for the Texas Veteran Hospital.
These are all state projects.
These are state projects,
Okay.
and my concern is services and access, because a lot of people don't know that how to navigate the system. I'm a very active constituent services. That was extremely important to me when I was in office, that the people, when they call, whether it's a city issue, a county issue, a federal issue, that we take care of them. And nobody does that anymore. And I think that that's important. That's what I will do. I'll make sure I hire people, bilingual, trilingual if needed, whatever, that we can make sure that they're taken, their issues are addressed, that they're helped. And on the state level, I'm going to be there to advocate. We used to do, hundreds of letters for people at the state level, but we also did constituent work for other members who didn't do it. So
Okay.
I would always tell my staff, you refer it, and if they don't want to do it, you bring them back over here and we'll take care of it. So.
Okay, so we're approaching the end of our interview, but I want to talk about one or two more things.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the school districts, because this is on a lot of people's minds right now. We've got 9 school districts in El Paso County. I actually filed some open records requests from all 9 districts, and I learned that the student enrollment in 10 years has dropped 14%, from 176,000 students in our 9 school districts to 153,000, with quite a few of those going to charter schools, some being homeschooled. The population of El Paso, the city, has been declining by about 1,000 a year. These are all problems, and the school districts in El Paso are starved for money. The state gives $6,160 per student and has not increased that amount for a long time, is my understanding.
In 2017 or something.
The last state budget surplus, nothing went to
public education.
Nothing went to public education, not to K through 12, and very little to higher education as well, to the University of Texas campuses. So, are you in favor of school vouchers?
No.
Tell us why.
I think it takes away from the public school system, and we are already underfunded. Other people have the argument that the public school system isn't doing enough. But I want to go back to what you said about the population and also the number of students, because we had a conversation early on about consolidation.
Right.
What a school, I don't know about a super one school district, but with what you're documenting in all these little mini schools, districts, the smaller school districts, and the big, is it time to do a study, Bill, on consolidation and what it would save the taxpayers?
It would be immense. I've learned that in the 9 school districts, there are 1,200 people earning over $100,000. It's an incredible number. In EPISD, just to take an example, among the 472 highest paid people in EPISD, you know how many teachers there are? You have to go to employee number 473 in terms of pay to get to a teacher.
Wow.
That is how bloated and top-heavy these administrations are. So,
and is that El Paso, or is that pretty much across the state, do you think?
it's probably across the country, but in El Paso, it's particularly problematic. So we learned that SISD, Socorro, which is the second biggest school district in our county, is $100.5 million in the red. That's a projected deficit through fiscal year 2025. It is a devastating figure, and I hate to say it, but it could lead to Chapter 9 bankruptcy. That could happen in that district. They're already under conservatorship. They can't cut enough. It's going to be real bad. Canutillo, they're about 15 million in the red, but that's a very small school district, so that's very impactful. EPISD, they've already burned through their last bond, which was 2/3 of $1 billion, and now they're going to go for another 600 million. It never seems to end, the amount of money needed. And those bonds, by the way, do not fund personnel, and they do not relate to student outcomes. It's just buildings, infrastructure. Buildings, contracts, upgrades, HVAC. That's all it is. And it's good to have nice new school buildings, but our outcomes, the proficiency in reading and math, especially in elementary and middle school in our school districts, is way down there. High school's marginally better, but still not impressive. And so this is driving a lot of people to take their kids out of the local schools, which are financially collapsing, some of them, and put them into charter schools, which are not often better. I will admit that. There's some charter schools.
Some of the regulatories, they're not regulated as they could and should be, in my opinion. But are the outcomes the same or better?
The jury's still out because these charter schools are very new.
Yeah.
And I can't say. I can say that in cities like New Orleans, charter schools have made a positive impact on the outcomes for poorer people, because those schools were even worse. You know, you go to a place like Nassau County, New York, which have, you know, very high school taxes. Their public schools are like Harvards, little Harvards. I mean, they, you know, from the public school system, they send their kids to Princeton, Harvard, Yale.
That's what we should do.
Exactly. So, you know, we might disagree a little bit. I'm actually open to competition, because maybe competition will drive the school districts to reform themselves.
I think we need to deal with the bloated budgets first.
It's a problem,
Period.
and the school districts want to ignore it, okay? It's not just the starvation from the state, cutting off funding or not increasing funding. It's also the bloated, top-heavy, and oftentimes, I'm going to say it, corrupt practices of the upper administrations. How many supers have ended up in jail or been fired? Or, you know, board of trustees. I mean, it's just, it's really something to behold, especially in the last few years.
Few days.
We keep learning more and more. And it's unfortunate, because I would love the school districts to succeed, right? I mean,
they're not funded. There's a lot of problems with the public education school system. I can tell you that particular committee, I'm not really sure if Mary Gonzalez is on that one, but you know, she's got a PhD. But that committee, people absolutely crawl and fight to be on, and usually have, you know, the top members of the legislature on that committee. I don't know what it's like anymore, but we have obviously Texas is falling behind. And I don't know, when you have companies like Tesla and all this Japanese investment in like Austin, how we can sustain these companies coming when our public education level is not where it needs to be. So
it's a real problem.
It is.
It's got to be fixed. You know, I'd be in favor of, you know, if we're going to increase the per student subsidy in our school districts, it should be contingent upon a 10% reduction in the workforce of the administration. They need to go in there and they need to shrink. They need to become more efficient. There are too many assistant principals, too many counselors, too many diversity officers. I mean, they have to absolutely find efficiencies.
Like it used to be.
You know,
like it got done.
It used to be that there was the teacher and the schoolhouse.
And the
people in the
principal.
community would pay, no, just the teacher. You'd pay the teacher, you'd send your kid to the schoolhouse, and that was the education. And
We're not going to go back to that, Max.
we're not going to go back to that, I understand, but my point is that there are 7,000 something employees at EPISD, and less than half of them are teachers. I mean, I don't know how it's come to this. Consolidation, interesting idea, going from 9 to 3 districts. That would be a state issue.
You could do a study, Bill. And the study of it would be the savings. Some of the studies are for conversation, for public debate, for public, you know, to force it out there where people can say, look, we have a problem here. And the thinkers of the community, the players of the community, have to realize it and quit skirting it underneath the bed. And that's what happens with too many issues in El Paso. Nobody wants to go against, you know, the power elites of this community. And I have no problem saying what I think. I think that's an only child, you know, syndrome is what I've been told. But sometimes it has to be said, because we are such a great community with so many opportunities to expand on, that we shouldn't allow this debt to kill us.
Yeah.
We lost population, which is why we lost a state rep. We had 5 state reps. I'm running in 77 because 76 is in Houston somewhere. Okay? We lost a state rep because we lost population. We have a senator a congressperson drawn into here because we lost population. We're losing population New Mexico is booming because their taxes are not out of whack and their education system is better.
See, what you're saying, Norma, is absolutely correct, and nobody's talking about it. And
Nobody wants to talk
it's
about
refreshing
it.
to hear you talk about it because during the census period, the state of Texas grew 15.9%. I think it was the most growth in the entire United States. But El Paso grew less than 5%. And starting in 2017, the city began to lose population for the first time since the Great Depression, since 1932. And then you go to Sunland Park, Santa Teresa, Las Cruces, and they're growing at double digits. 14%, 14.5%.
They can't afford it.
Socorro, Horizon City exploding, right?
Horizon City is way exploded. So anyway, I would be honored for the people of House District 77 to send me back to Austin. I'm ready. I go with seniority. I would go as an 8th-term member. I would be in the top 30 out of 150 House of representative members. Seniority does matter, not just for committee assignments, but it matters in the public conversation on important issues. You have an experienced person that knows how to cut the deals, knows how to move from a bill that's dead to a bill that you can add on that's germane. Those are issues that you learn as a member in 14 years. It's not something a freshman can do. And with the blessing of my parents, with the blessing of a great campaign team, I am looking forward to the 28th. We're scared to death of the turnout, and we're asking people to please go out and vote between May 20th and May 24th. Early vote, because the election is actually on the 28th, which is the day after Memorial Weekend.
Early voting begins Monday. Go to the polls, vote for Norma Chavez. Contact her through her webpage, which is
normaforelpaso.com.
normaforelpaso.com. Donate, contribute generously so that you can make that final push. Give your time, be a poll watcher, help block walk, get her over the finish line so that she can be a voice for the taxpayers of House District 77.
And
so that we can prevent Vince Perez from getting in there to basically
increase the salary.
Yeah, he'll find a way to do it. Yeah.
Right, but thank you so much, Max. I really appreciate it.
Norma, it's such a pleasure to have you and an honor. Thank you.